Bronx. The New York City Housing Authority dedicating the newly renovated basketball courts at the James Monroe houses. Courts had fallen into disrepair, but that guy right there stepped up. Knicks star Carmelo Anthony and his foundation. Paving, paint, backboards, balls. Melo was there for the fun.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Okay, we back in the Bronx. This is part 2 to a previous story we did about a crew based out of the StevensonCommons. This story will surround the events that took place from the perspective of their enemies, the Monroe crew. The Monroe Crew is a neighborhood-based enterprise which takes its name and its members from the neighborhood in and around the Monroe housing complex, which is located in the Soundview section of the Bronx. Within the vicinity of Monroe, there are several other low-income apartment complexes which have similarly developed various other neighborhood-based crews, such as the StevensonCommons, the Castle Hill houses and the Soundview houses. During the 1990s, this broader area succumbed to gang violence perpetuated by the Blood Street gang sex money murder. Although the unifying structure of SMM dissipated over the years, the violence and criminal enterprise continued, but now with a local residence-based war added to the equation. The different housing developments have each established their own groups, committing various forms of drug dealing and violent crime. More importantly, they have been battling to various degrees and in various forms for decades. Throughout the years, several larger gang affiliations have taken root throughout the communities, but the one constant which dominated and often dictated allegiances remained. The rivalries among and between the neighboring housing projects has been location. Without the overarching reach of SMM to quell the rivalries between the different projects, each independent unit rose strong as separate individual groups and against the others. Two of the crews which have been at persistent war with one another are the StevensonCommons crew and the Monroe housing crew. These two groups ingrained a rivalry which forced allegiances and vendettas between residents, simply by which structure they were born into. A cycle of violence, one-upping, and tit-for-tat, which has spanned the better part of the past at least 15 years. There is a long-standing pattern of violence perpetuated by one group against the other, followed by retributive violence by the latter. The war between StevensonCommons and Monroe probably existed before most of these young men were old enough to have been aware of its existence, perhaps even before they was born. But when these young men made the regrettable decision to affiliate with members of this community, they became soldiers in these two projects' war. There was also a subset of gang members from the Monroe houses who formed their own gang called F-N-word, Female Dog, or FNB, but you can guess what it stands for. And as we stated, many members
A dog is a crazy name for non-civilians. That's a crazy name.
of the Monroe houses crew are also members of the Sex Money Murder Bloods. Let's start by mentioning some of their fallen members. The first person we will get into is Benji. Benji was well loved and appeared in many of the early videos when the Bronx was mobbing.
If they say full save, am I tripping? I think I'm tripping.
He put in his fair share of work for Monroe, and even named himself on Facebook, Forever Monroe, salute me or shoot me. Monroe Projects has had its internal beefs, when the young guys from 805 were beefing with 11th Side. Benji represented 11th Side down low Monroe affiliation. If you know, you know. The beef allegedly started when S.GZ and Carlito got jumped by 805 guys. S.GZ was really 800, but the connection to Monroe has nothing to do with that. This was Monroe business. Anyway, StevensonCommons had beef with the guys from the 800 side of Monroe, and 11th side guys such as Benji had a connection with StevensonCommons.
Gang shit. Buddy roll shit. Fuck with the niggas, man. I'm out here, nigga. Trapping by myself, nigga. Dolo, Biggie all. Cops on niggas right now. Try to knock them, try to cut me off and all that. At the gear right there. That's all you sneak this, man. Suck my man. Listen, all you broke, ratchet ass, suck my man. If you don't know me, nigga, Google me, nigga. You already know, man. Fuck with you guys, man. Gang, gang, gang shit, nigga.
Even after the death of Benji, guys from StevensonCommons sent their love and rest in peace tributes. In mid-March of 2016, Benji was fatally blasted in the chest after an argument. He was shot multiple times in the torso about 3:10 p.m. outside the Monroe houses. Emergency personnel rushed him to Jacoby Medical Center in critical condition, but he could not be saved, cops said. I heard a lot of commotion. When I did come to the window, he was on the ground, said one witness, who asked to remain anonymous. It's a shame. One more young kid. So sad. The cops found a loaded .380 caliber handgun and 5 shell casings at the scene. Witnesses said police found the gun tossed in the grass behind a fence at the housing complex. There were no immediate arrests. Not sure if anyone has been arrested for Benji's murder up until this day. Here is a video of 11th side, including Benji, chasing the 805 building guys. They are chasing Bobby, and P. Black's name is even mentioned. P. Black was killed in 2021, and we spoke about that in part 1. Not sure if it's this Bobby in the video. This Bobby was indicted with the other Monroe guys we will soon speak about. It was said that he was selling drugs and carrying guns for the crew. Might be him, might not be.
Yeah, we out here, mo. Niggas is slacking, mo. Bum ass 805 niggas, you heard? Niggas is pussy. Look. Look at these niggas running, strap. Look at these niggas running, strap. We are going. Give me a punch. Look. We outside, nigga, what's up? Look at that pussy nigga Bobby, you heard? Look at that pussy nigga Bobby. Look. Look at that pussy nigga Bobby, you heard? That nigga pussy, you heard? Look. Yo, D. Hold, grab that nigga, D. Grab that nigga, D. Grab that nigga, D. What? Show that nigga, go. Huh? Show that. Yo, come here, Bobby. Come here, Bobby. Hey, you lacking, Bobby? You lacking? What's up? You lacking, Bobby? You on? Don't run, nigga. Look at that nigga, Bobby. He pussy, look at P. Black. Look. Bum ass niggas, we on your side, you heard? Fuck 805.
Here, Benji is pictured with no other than Lou Billy. Lou Billy was definitely one of the top ops in Monroe. It's definitely a if you know thing, but he had been involved in crime since a teen. On November 2, 2016, 8 months after Benji was killed, a knife-wielding perp fatally stabbed Lou Billy. He was 25 at the time. Lou had survived 2 prior shootings, but this time, he wasn't so lucky. The attacker knifed Lou in the stomach and the right thigh during a fight outside the Monroe houses on Soundview Avenue near Lafayette Avenue about 10:30 p.m. It was a weekday, a Tuesday specifically. A woman rushed to Lou's side seconds after he was stabbed, but it wasn't clear if she was with him prior to the attack. Help him. The woman was heard yelling, "Don't die." Family members told police that Lou had gone to a local Applebee's, but did not know what he had done afterwards. Police did not immediately reveal a motive for the slaying. Lou had been shot twice before. He was hit in the head on Rosedale Avenue in November 2009 and was shot in the left arm near his home on Story Avenue in June 2011. The February before Benji died, someone had fired several shots at his apartment door. It's crazy to see dead young men in pictures, and they haven't even reached age 30. Sad case. Another fallen member was Ty. Ty was supposedly originally from Monroe houses, but had family in the Commons. It was said that around 2015, a guy named G, along with whoever else from the Commons, said that they were willing to squash the beef. Because Ty had ties to both Monroe and StevensonCommons, he would be the one to facilitate the squashing. However, when Ty pulled up with the guys from StevensonCommons, they started blasting at the Monroe guys. The Monroe guys fired back. From what we know, no one was hit in the exchange. Now, it is unclear whether Ty was a part of the setup or he too was set up. There was supposed to be a truce between the two projects, and being that Ty was the facilitator, guys from Monroe could feel like Ty set them up. On the flip side of things, it was alleged that Ty took the problem up with G. Now this can be cap, but one thing is true though, on one late night in January of 2015, a gun-wielding man walked up to G, shot him in the eye, then ran into 1880 Lafayette Avenue, the Commons. G was taken to a hospital and survived, but it was said that he lost his eye. Surveillance video from inside an elevator showed the unidentified gunman with a mask over his face and what appears to be a gun in his hand. He was described only as a Hispanic male in his early 20s. So, this couldn't be Ty, right? Because Ty is dark-skinned. In 2017, Ty would be killed in what was called a drug deal gone wrong. A dude named Divine was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison after a jury convicted him in the shooting murder of 2 men, one of those men being Ty. This wasn't Divine's first rodeo though. He had been in the streets getting into crime since the mid-2000s. When he was 16, he shot and wounded another man during a near-midnight robbery in the Soundview houses. He allegedly accosted a 40-year-old man when he was getting off an elevator. Divine, a teen at the time, demanded jewelry and cash from the victim, prompting a struggle, leading Divine to fire a shot that grazed the victim in the face. The victim survived, and Divine was subsequently arrested. Here it is a whole 11 years later, and he would participate in the murder of Ty. According to the investigation, about 4 a.m. on July 1, 2017, inside an SUV on Commonwealth Avenue, Divine shot Ty in the back of the head, causing his death. He also shot another dude, ironically named Ty, in the face as well. Divine then fired shots into the vehicle, striking the latter Ty in the chest. Divine then fled to Georgia and was arrested approximately a month after the incident. You can see Ty in these pictures with Roe, one of the higher-ranking members from the Commons. This showed that he indeed had an allegiance with them. So far, we dealt with the background. Now let's get into the players that were involved in the most recent Monroe indictment. First up, Bowler. The government's goal was to prove that Bowler committed the most acts of gun violence of his co-defendants, specifically 4 shootings. But before we get into the specifics, we have to do some background. His family, the name Ely, had made their mark in the Monroe houses. One of 4 siblings, Bowler was the baby boy. His older brother, Fawn, was also charged in this indictment, for non-violent crimes though. He was originally indicted in January 2020 for a June 2017 shooting, but these charges were dismissed on April 7, 2021, after it was discovered that the government's key cooperator against him had lied, and DNA evidence did not support the charge. Fawn had been in the streets, but he wasn't all into the violence like that. He caught a gun charge back in 2012, and when he was a minor, he was adjudicated a youthful offender for a robbery. He was said to be one of the many perps involved. He and his younger brother, Bowler, grew up in the same household. To be blunt, Bowler had a horrific upbringing. Starting at the age of 11 months, Bowler was hurt in a house fire in his family's apartment. He was saved when his father threw him out the window to be caught by family members 4 stories below. As a result of the fire, suffering from severe smoke inhalation, Bowler spent several weeks intubated in an incubator. The injuries left him with a lifelong case of asthma. Fawn suffered similar injuries and was in a coma for 5 days. He was 4 at the time. The trauma caused him to not want to sleep in his own bed and to sleep on the living room couch, with 1 foot to the ground, in case he had to flee. They grew up under impoverished conditions. While Bowler never went hungry, he recalled evenings where dinners were porridge or peanut butter sandwiches. On occasion, he recalled his father resorting to theft in order to provide the family with basics such as food and clothing. Bowler's father was a drug addict and was in and out of jail throughout Bowler's life. Bowler's relationship with his mother is more complicated. From an early age, Ms. Ely beat him and his siblings on a regular basis. Bowler tries to excuse her abusive behavior. He believes his mother felt as if the only way she could control him and his 3 brothers was by using beatings. Bowler reported that his mother beat him with any object she could get her hands on, including whipping him with an extension cord. Those beatings left bruises, marks, and sometimes drew blood. Bowler was afraid to report the abuse because he was afraid he'd be sent to foster care, where, as he heard, the abuse could be much worse. As for Fawn, who was a little older, was taking notice to the things around him. His dad had been a victim of a knife attack, which left a distinctive scar under his eye. By the time Fawn was 11, Fawn had been shot in crossfire while playing basketball. The incident was traumatic and caused him to not want to go outside anymore for a while. 4 of their 5 paternal uncles had died of cancer, so the violence and loss of loved ones was coming fast. Bowler had his own share of problems that was to soon come his way. When Bowler was only in 4th grade, he was abused by a female teacher. The abuse lasted through 5th grade. Another person reported the abuse to the school, and the principal called Bowler's parents. When he was asked, he denied being abused because he was afraid of the consequences. He never received any counseling to help him deal with the abuse. Bowler finally admitted the truth to his parents when he was 15. Things were rough for the family. Bowler became involved in fights on a near-daily basis. When he was 13, Bowler began smoking marijuana, followed by ecstasy when he was 14. Bowler also used Percocet, Xanax, and ecstasy regularly from 2015 up until his arrest. Today he is 26, with 6 children. With no education, no job, and a criminal history, he is facing at least 7 years in jail, and possibly 12. However, a deeper look at him shows
That's the worst, bro. That is just unfortunate and disappointing, man. That's the worst thing ever. Worst thing ever.
he is the product of a violent, oppressively poor upbringing. Even with that, it is necessary to reflect the seriousness of his criminal conduct. For years, he was a core participant in the Monroe Houses crew, a violent gang that engaged in drug trafficking, bank fraud, and shootings in the Soundview neighborhood of the Bronx. It was said that he served as the triggerman in different attempted murders. On June 6, 2015, a member of FNB, a rival gang, came over to the Monroe Houses and got into an argument with members of the Monroe Houses crew. One of Bowler's brothers then gave the gun to Bowler, who shot at the FNB member near 872 Rosedale Avenue. 2017 and 2018 would be eventful for the Ealys. It was said that Bowler's eldest brother had gotten shot, and Bowler himself was shot. His other brother had been a victim of police brutality, and another had been stabbed. On June 30, 2017, a former member of the Monroe Houses crew was arguing with Bowler in front of 1760 Story Avenue in the Monroe Houses, when Bowler pulled out a gun and shot the individual in the abdomen at point-blank range. The victim of this shooting was critically injured and hospitalized for over 10 days, with a bullet lodged in the victim's stomach. Thankfully, the victim survived, despite suffering a collapsed lung while at the hospital. On May 23, 2018, multiple 911 callers, including some in tears and begging for help, reported a shooting inside the Monroe Houses, during which Bowler had shot at the mother of his child and her family multiple times. A week later, on May 30,
What type of... That is... This is all a skip, but that is crazy. What? What type... What was he on, bro? What?
2018, at approximately 11 p.m., Bowler went on another drill. This time, it was a drive-by shooting of rival gang members from the Soundview houses. During this shooting, Bowler fired multiple shots out of the window of a car, as he and other Monroe Houses crew members drove by a deli where rival gang members were congregated. Multiple cars were hit, and the storefront of the deli was also damaged during the shooting. During this time frame, the Soundview neighborhood of the Bronx was one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in all of New York City. These are 4 incidents in a pattern of crimes committed by Bowler between 2015 and 2019. In May 2015, he was arrested and charged in Bronx County Criminal Court with unauthorized use of a vehicle. While this case was pending, however, he incurred another arrest in July 2015 after stealing from a grocery store. These charges led to a guilty plea for petite larceny in February 2016. Even after committing the shootings though, Bowler got into it with a subway passenger in Midtown Manhattan in October 2019, threatening and striking the victim with a blunt object in the face. His disciplinary history and BOP custody while awaiting trial and sentencing is another thing. Between March 2020 and September 2021, Bowler incurred 10 disciplinary infractions, including multiple infractions for fighting with others, approximately 5 different infractions for being insolent to BOP staff members, multiple infractions for refusing to obey orders, and threatening bodily harm against others. Sometime around this time, Bowler's father would get shot and recovered. Meanwhile, Bowler was in jail doing what he felt he had to do to survive. According to his most recent inmate disciplinary record, he incurred yet another disciplinary infraction in May 2023 for refusing work and being unsanitary and untidy. Many of these infractions have resulted in the loss of Bowler's good time credits. That's about it for Bowler though. But like Bowler, another Monroe crew member, JD, has committed multiple acts of violence. JD was born in New York in November of 1999. JD's father was murdered at the age of 22 in 2002 when JD was just 2 years old. His father was a member of the Bloods gang and murdered in a gang-related shooting. Following his father's death, his mother began to date a close friend of JD's father when JD was 3. JD and the man developed a close relationship that included the man, we will call him Marlon, sharing details about JD's father's life. JD became close with Marlon's family, even being referred to as nephew by the man's younger brothers. JD was close with Marlon's mother until her death in 2014. When JD was 12 years old, Marlon was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to a term of 6 years. JD saw Marlon escorted by Department of Corrections officers at Marlon's mother's funeral in 2014. Marlon was released from his incarceration in 2018. Like most others in this story, Marlon was born and grew up in the Soundview neighborhood of the Bronx. The family lived in the James Monroe houses. Violence and crime remained constant throughout JD's childhood. The racketeering conspiracy count to which JD pleaded guilty makes clear that others involved were already committing violent and illegal acts from at least the time JD was 11 years old. In order to get away from the violence and crime that were endemic to the James Monroe houses, JD moved to Columbia, Maryland. He had a few staying stints there and in Virginia, then Monticello, but ended up back in the Bronx sometime after. JD excelled on the basketball court, playing for his high school, even trained with former NBA players. He received a basketball scholarship and went to Leesburg High School in Florida from 2015 until 2016. His little sister followed his footsteps and took up basketball. Even so, the influences of the neighborhood would grab JD up. Although he has no prior history, these are the things he is alleged to be responsible for in this indictment. On September 30, 2018, JD shot at an unknown individual in the Monroe houses. The next day, on October 1, 2018, shots were fired near 755 White Plains Road in the StevensonCommons. Shell casings from that shooting matched shell casings from JD's shooting the day before. Then on November 17, 2018, JD shot at Roe, who was a main character in the last story and a high-ranking member of the StevensonCommons crew. JD shot at Roe's car while JD was with Nelson Ramos, who was, at the time, a high-ranking member of the Monroe House's crew. Roe would participate in Nelson Ramos's murder a few months later. JD also participated in multiple robberies with his co-defendant, Dizzy. For example, the day Nelson was killed, on January 6, 2019, JD and Dizzy robbed a victim of cash in the lobby of 1762 Story Avenue in the Monroe houses, during which JD threatened the victim with a gun. Finally, JD participated in the beating and slashing of a rival gang member on September 14, 2019, that is charged in Count 8 of the indictment. Before we get into the slashing, we must talk about the person who was said to have actually did the slashing, Nas. This is Nas' first arrest and conviction. Nas was born on October 1997. His father, Ray, was never really in his life. It is believed that Ray is currently in prison serving a sentence for murder. His mother was 20 years old when she became pregnant with Nas and a junior in college. Due to her pregnancy, she dropped out of college. She held honest and good employment, Board of Education jobs, and dental assistant. When Nas was about 6 years old, his mom and a man she had gotten into a relationship with had a baby. Nas was thrilled to have a sister. From day one, he was her big brother and protector. His mom, sister, and himself were still living in Monroe houses, but after some time, they obtained their own apartment on Prospect Avenue. The place was not far from the Monroe houses. Prior to November 2007, Nas' sister was a normal, talkative, inquisitive 3-year-old. Nas was also a happy child. He did well in school, played basketball, played chess, and loved math. But things took a drastic change for the worse in November 2007. A month before his sister's 4th birthday, right after a wonderful family Thanksgiving celebration, she fell ill with a fever. Nas was 10 years old. The fever climbed higher and higher and she went into a seizure. His mother immediately called 911, but when the paramedics finally arrived, Nas' sister was in distress. The paramedics arrived without oxygen. Precious time was lost and by the time she arrived at the hospital, she was blue and not responsive. Nas witnessed it all, including his mother's hysterics and uncontrollable screaming. Nas was also present when the doctor told his mother that his sister would likely be blind, unable to walk or talk. She remained in a coma from November 27 until December 19, a few days before she turned 4 years old. Nas visited his sister at the hospital and rehabilitation center. He saw the multitude of tangled tubes and machines to which she was connected. He witnessed her struggle to walk and move at the rehabilitation center. When she was finally released from the rehabilitation center to come home, she could not walk or talk, she could not feed herself, she was not toilet trained. In short, she had reverted back to infancy. She had to be taught again, and the task was overwhelming. Because of her preoccupation with his sister's rehabilitation, his mom recognized that she could not adequately care for him, and she sent him to live with her own mother. Nas would see his mother and sister on only weekends. When he did see them, Nas helped with his sister's therapy. He helped feed her, helped her walk, read to her, encouraged her to talk. He did all he could to make her smile and laugh. But when he was in his mother's presence, Nas also witnessed his mother's bouts of depression and excessive crying. As time wore on, he witnessed her anger, not only at the situation, but also at the institutions that she believes were responsible for her daughter's loss of oxygen, which had caused her brain damage. After his mother sent him to live with his grandmother, Nas felt abandoned and unloved. Having never known his father, and now feeling that he had been pushed aside by his mother in favor of his sister's urgent need for round-the-clock care, Nas reacted out of insecurity with an overwhelming desire to re-establish his position in the family. When it came to his sister, Nas imitated his mother's overreactive behavior. As her big brother, he saw it as part of his obligation to protect her. Indeed, his participation in the slashing on September 14, 2019, had something to do with disrespect to his sister. At a young age, he began to self-medicate. His use of illicit drugs began when he was 11, and by the age of 14, he was smoking marijuana 10 times a day, a habit that lasted until his arrest in January 2020. In addition, he later became addicted to Percocet after he was prescribed the medication in connection with a hand injury that he sustained after being jumped. Even in the days of his mother, teenagers from the Monroe Housing Project thought of their classmates from the Soundview houses or the Castle Hill houses as enemies. She had no understanding of the basis for the rivalry, only that it existed for as long as she can remember. Thus, she was not shocked to learn of the continued rivalry when Nas entered Stevenson High School. This is the closest high school to both StevensonCommons and Monroe houses. Many teens from the Soundview section of the Bronx attend Stevenson High in general. However, the gang activity and violence had reached a much higher level by the time Nas entered high school. The neighborhood itself had become increasingly dangerous for all the residents. Violent crime was commonplace, even murders were not unusual. The degree of violence in and around the Monroe houses is clear from the indictment itself. The chances of a resident of the Bronx becoming a victim of a violent crime even today are 1 in 11, as compared to New York State, where the chance is 1 in 279. In 2020, the violent crime rate in the Soundview section of the Bronx, which is where the Monroe houses are located, was 174% higher than the rest of the nation. You heard correct, the nation. Nas, himself, was a victim of violence. In 2015, he was attacked not far from his home. His left hand was cut and required stitches. He still has a scar on his hand. Then in 2017, once again near his home, he was assaulted and received knife cuts to his left hand. Again, he required stitches on his hand. He can't completely extend the fingers due to tendons in his hand being severed. He transferred to a trade school. The hope was that Nas would make new friends, but that did not happen. Finally, he abandoned school. At the time of the commission of the offense, he was working at Flat Rate Moving Company, and he was living at both his mother's home and his grandmother's home. Nas gravitated to the Monroe houses both to visit friends, but also to assist his grandmother. He worried for her safety after he was attacked twice because he knew of several stabbings and shootings in the area. In early September 2019, members of the 670 gang from the Castle Hill houses known as the Coke Boys appeared in a rap video taunting the Monroe houses crew. The person who would eventually be the victim of the slashing on September 14, 2019, appeared in that video. It was also said that prior to the slashing incident, the victim made a derogatory, disrespectful comment about Nas' sister on social media. JD, Dizzy, and Nas got in a car and drove to the deli across from the Castle Hill houses. By now, if you faithfully watch this channel, you know about this deli. Anyway, Dizzy and Nas brought weapons, box cutters, and arrived with their hoods up in an effort to conceal themselves. When the Monroe house's crew members arrived, the victim was cornered, outnumbered, and brutally attacked. They started repeatedly kicking the victim in the face while he was down. While Nas did the actual slashing, Dizzy was armed and ready to commit the slashing, as he is clearly seen brandishing an orange box cutter on the video. As it turned out, it was Nas who seized on the opening to slash the victim, which Dizzy helped make possible by kicking the victim in the head. This caused the victim to draw his hands up to protect his head and exposing his lower back. JD pulled the guy's hair and was also kicking the victim, allowing Nas to get the slashing off. The victim suffered a 10-inch laceration to his lower right back, requiring 12 staples to close the wound. We spoke about this in the Castle Hill vs. Monroe story. Nas will be referred to as Billy, which is Nas' street name. The perspective is a little different, so watch it for different context. The next person we will speak about is Willie. Willie is charged with the most serious of conduct of all his co-defendants, murder. Even before the murder, he was involved in a few shootings. 2 shootings on April 27, 2017 and April 28, 2017, in the vicinity of the Monroe houses, involving him and other members of the crew, and a shooting on June 30, 2017. This might be the shooting in which Bowler shot the dude in the projects, collapsing his lung. But on October 31, 2017, things take a deadly turn. It was Halloween night. At approximately 8:40 p.m., about 8 rivals from the Soundview crew stormed a deli near the Monroe houses and began assaulting 2 members of the Monroe houses crew and throwing eggs at them. Several minutes later, members of the Monroe houses crew responded to the deli, where they congregated in the back of the store. These individuals included Willie and Dizzy. At approximately 8:45 p.m., Willie and other members of the Monroe houses crew departed the Empire Deli and began walking towards the Soundview houses to retaliate. Upon arriving at the Soundview houses, Willie pulled out a gun and fired approximately 6 shots in front of 1715 Randall Avenue, hitting Luis Vargas, 16 years old, and injuring 2 other victims, who were 15 and 24 years old. Luis had been shot in the head. His family rushed to Jacobi Medical Center where he was transported. They held vigil for 3 days, but Luis died. His family donated his organs and we saved a lot of lives, including a 16-year-old young lady who stayed in the neighborhood. She received one of his kidneys. Detectives were still scouring the neighborhood, looking for clues and information about the shooting. They figured that one of the individuals seen exiting the bodega may have been one of the shooters involved. 6 months later, Willie would get arrested with a gun in or around the projects. Willie pled guilty to the murder of Luis Vargas in late August of 2022. He was a teenager when he pulled the trigger that Halloween night 5 years before. Most of the guys in the indictment have not been sentenced yet. Like we showed in the prior video, Minnie is in this picture with Willie and JD. Crazy, because Minnie was involved in the murder of Nelson Ramos, which was one of the big homies from Monroe. But they are all SMM anyway, and these days, dudes plot who they eat with and also, jail politics.